Cool. We're good to go? Live everywhere? All right. Well, the first thing that we had a couple questions. So last week we talked about all sorts of things regarding neurological development, and then throughout the week we've accumulated some questions on the school community, and we are going to be answering several things today. The main thing that I'm going to go over within the first 20 minutes or so is I want to talk about this thing that I was learning that is applicable to older kids and also parents, something called top-down control. It has everything to do with stress. And so this is going to be super cool for parents who have kids that are on the neurodivergent or some sort of spectrum or challenges, and how this is affecting mom and dad, but also understanding what's going on in the brain of the child. And then I think there's a couple things here that might apply to basically everyone if you can, picture it. But before we get into that, I was going to wait for a little bit to see how many people come on. If we have anybody who's live, that way we can answer some questions ahead of time or just say hi to people. I know we have a couple people in school that are live right now, I think, right? So Natalie's there. I know Natalie was there earlier.
I know. Yep.
Yeah. What's up, Natalie? Let's see. If you want, what we could do is a little bit of a refresher before we get going, because I want more people to kind of be there, sir, if they have any questions about it. But the refresher before is some of the things that we were talking about last time had a lot to do with the three, or maybe it's like 5 pillars, basically, of neurological development and understanding what are some of the things that are affecting the things at the bottom and how that impacts the top. And the biggest thing was something called disafferentation, which is basically bad input into the brain. We're going to talk about that today. It's okay. We're going to talk about that today and how this impacts basically stress management. And so with this top-down control. I think we're good to go. I mean, we could just get rolling. All right. Well, basically, one of the things that I want to talk about here is something called top-down control, which is basically stress neurology. And so if you have a child with a neurodivergent condition, typically as a parent, it's an extremely stressful situation to be in. And that stress over enough time, particularly chronic stress in the mind and heart of a parent, will have actual physical impacts on them. Not only is it going to have impacts on the child, because obviously the children are affected with the stress, but it's actually really going to affect the parent. And something called top-down control is in reference to, we have the frontal cortex of the brain, and then we have more of the primitive part of the brain. And so I'm going to start by, giving you a story or an analogy that I feel like most everybody has been in. So if you guys have ever been in a situation where you're driving the car and you have a couple kids in the back seat, it's raining really loud, the windshield wipers are going, and you feel like you're getting lost, and you have the music playing. It's playing probably some sort of annoying child music, and the stimulation is super high. What is the first thing that you do when you get in a situation like that? When you're like, I can't find my next exit, the stress is piling in, what is one of the first things that you're going to do? You're probably going to turn down.
Music down. I can't see.
Sit somewhere else, dude. You're going to turn down the music, right? So when you're in a situation where you have a ton of stress, what your nervous system wants to do is calm itself down as much as it can by lowering stimulation, right? And so what that means and what's going on is when you're in a state of stress, your nervous system is unable to use the more logical frontal cortex of the brain, and what it's going to do is it's going to revert into more of a primitive sensory-seeking part of the brain. And what that basically means is that when you're in a state of stress, this part of the brain is lit up, and it's clouding your actual decision-making. And all you want to do is figure out how to calm down this part of the brain. So for an example, like you're stressed out driving, and it's raining, and it's stressful, and the music's loud, you're turning down the sensory input regarding auditory sensory. So you're going to turn down the volume. You might even tell the kids, shut up, stop talking, stop fighting with each other, right? So you're telling your nervous system is needing that volume to come down. And then there's a couple other things that might happen. You might get super anxious, right? Your pupils are going to dilate, your hands might get sweaty, and all that is primitive reflexes, or primitive, not primitive reflexes, but primitive brain active and your body is trying its best to calm it down. Now, how does this apply to parents? When you are living in a chronic state of stress, and that stress literally could just be like, your child was diagnosed with autism maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, and there is a ton of cascade of events that has to happen after that, and they may not in and of themselves be as hugely traumatic, but as it piles on, it becomes this constant level of stress that just continues to snowball. It gets more and more and more. What happens is that your literal brain neurology and mapping is going to weaken this part of your brain, which is where that frontal cortex, prefrontal cortex, which makes logical decisions, has good risk management, understands consequences, can see long-term ahead, is able to feel confident enough to be able to make even risky decisions because you've calculated, this is going to be yielding me this kind of return on investment with this decision, and I can make a educated guess on how this is going to turn out. That's all frontal cortex things. When you live in a chronic state of stress, that's really hard for parents to do. And so what ends up happening is that they actually weaken this part of the brain. You can actually map it out. There's been research done on patients where they have had chronic levels of stress, and you'll see that this part of the brain is very underactive in comparison to the primitive part of the brain, which is extremely active. And what ends up happening is that you have a stressed individual that is unlikely to make long-term decisions, logical, calculated decisions. It's the emotional control is weak because now the sensory input is extremely high. And so you'll have parents that are going to have more of a pessimistic attitude. They're going to have an outlook on life that basically is, there is no hope, because what they end up basically fearing is change. When change is presented, change becomes a risk, and change becomes a challenge that they have to navigate because it's new. And obviously, when you're in a state of stress, the last thing you want is to navigate something new. You want to go back to what's familiar. So if we look at this from like a causal perspective, so what happens, basically what's going to lead to us living in a more primitive, reflexive state? And this goes for parents, and it goes for kids, and there's three things that are going to do that. The first one is going to be brain development. So for example, if you have a 2-year-old, it is absolutely normal for them to be more living in here than in the frontal cortex, because that hasn't even developed yet, right? So they're going to be more sensory sensitive, right? You'll have a kid where if they're in a loud space, or like we took Alice and Jane to Disney, and we went to this one into Magic Kingdom, right? And then there was this one section of the park that has you sit down and they have a big 3D movie, and they put on the glasses, and Mickey just jumped out at their face, and it was loud, and there was even spritz of water, and there's so much sensory that they just freaked out. And they're 2 years old, and that is extremely normal. That's completely understandable. Now, the other thing that's going to happen is if you have a primitive development or brain development that's lagging due to either a primitive reflex is integrated, or their ocular motor nervous system is not coordinated well, so their actual brain and their body coordination is off, and their visual coordination is off, that's going to keep them in a brain development that is lower development, and so they're going to lack living out here, and they're going to stick into here. And so that's one of the causes. I mean, again, one of them is completely normal. The other one is going to be stress. So clearly, the example that I gave earlier, when you're driving, you're stressed, it'll be natural for you to recede into that primitive nervous system. But this stress can be in 3 different ways. A lot of times adults typically will think that stress is just I had a stressful day, right? Like I was at work and my boss, was really mean to me, or I had an extreme, big deadline that due and I didn't make it. Or if you're in school, you have a project due. There's a lot of stressful things that we think of, but those are all emotional stressors. There's 3 types of stress. We have physical stress, chemical stress, and emotional stress. Emotional stress we understand very well, but there's chemical stressors, which has a lot to do with the foods that we eat, the drugs that we take, the pharmaceuticals, even the pollution that's in our world and our environment. And you can kind of include in the chemical stress, maybe if you think about it, the electromagnetic frequency stress that we are around, that has a lot to do with just unnatural EMFs are going to be impactful on that. You can put that into chemical or physical, depends on how you think about it. And then physical stressors are literal physical stressors, big car accidents down to micro traumas in your posture, all the way down to just from in utero. One of the biggest ones is going to be in utero constraint, C-sections, things like that. So all of those are going to shift the brain out of this and into here. Now, the last one is subluxation. This is where we fit into the equation the best. So where chiropractors live is understanding where the subluxation is and how it's impacting the neurology of the patient. So we want to make sure that when we are evaluating the nervous system of the child or the parent, our job is to see, is this guy causing this brain imbalance? And if so, how can we figure out how to lessen and adjust and correct the subluxation to allow for the neurodevelopmental pattern to either progress in the right direction if it's on that trajectory, or if it should already be there, how do we get the rest of the neurology to catch up to where it needs to be? So that's where subluxation plays a big, big role in understanding this top-down control and with basically understanding stress neurology. Because this is the exact same kind of blueprint that you could apply to a non-neurodivergent kid or a neurodivergent child. Whether they have a diagnosis or not, it's the same neurology depending on how you look at it. Okay? Now, the thing that I think is super important to understand about this is there are effects to this. So if you have lived in a constant state of lacking top-down control, particularly as a parent or an older child, typically that child would have to be somewhere around 9, 10 or above, they're going to show these effects. If you can't see them, I'll read them to you. One of the biggest ones is pessimistic attitude. And it's literally because when you're in a state of nervous system overload, you are not going to be optimistic about the future, because the future includes change in things that are new. And things that are new and things that are different from where you are now are a risk to you, because I don't know it yet. I haven't navigated those waters. Even if those are positive changes are still a stress because it's a risk. Because positive change means that you're going to deviate away from what you're used to, even if what you're used to is dysfunctional. You will prefer, if you're living in here, to stick to a known dysfunction than a unknown function. Mm-hmm. And that is super prevalent. We see this all the time when we have conversations with our parents, there'll be situations where kids are doing really well. They've been under care for 2 to 3 weeks. They have these amazing life-changing improvements. Their communication's improving, their eye contact's improving, they're potty trained. But then they have one day where it wasn't so good. They had a rough day. Maybe the behavior acted out, or their nervous system was overloaded, which sometimes, by the way, these are expected changes to happen. But even so, they look like a step backwards. And what that'll lead them to, because they're living in a pessimistic neurology, it'll be like there's just no hope. There's no way this is ever going to get better. I might as well just stop everything. I'm going to go back to what I was used to. And we can't necessarily blame the parents for that. This is literally the neurology that's very common in chronic stress and also PTSD in some of these parents. Some of these parents have severe stress to the point that you can actually consider that same or worse than veterans. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that they're going to have sensitivities, specifically sensory sensitivities, auditory sensitivities, physical sensitivities, olfactory or smelling sensitivities. That's because that part of the brain is super heightened. Those things are going to come in really, really loud into the nervous system. And one of the most common things of that, like I said, you're going to turn down the volume when you're stressed and whatnot. But also you're going to want to recede into comfort sensitivities. So another examples of this would be like if you had an extremely long day and it was very stressful and you get home and then your kids run at you and they, maybe it's loving and awesome. They want to hug you and tell you about their day and give you kisses and whatnot. Or your spouse is really they're juggling 15 different things. You get home from a long day and they want you to help out. The lights are blaring. There's kids, yelling, or music is loud. Internally, all you want to do is go in your room, put on comfy pajamas, and then just go to bed, right? So that's isolation, volume coming down, sensory becoming more comfortable, right? From work clothes to pajama clothes. These are all sensory information that you're seeking when you're in that state of stress. The next one's going to be reluctancy. This kind of pairs into the situation where they don't want to try new things. So in this situation, what they'll do is they'll basically, you can see this particularly in teenagers. A teenager that's underneath a lot of stress has very little ambition to strive for new things or activate different parts of their schedule or nervous system to like try maybe like a different curriculum or a different outdoor activity or a different schooling alternative. Like they or even if it's like a sporting event or whatever, even if it's going out with friends, sometimes they just really don't want to do any of that stuff because they will recede into like a reluctant, it's okay, I don't want to do that, don't worry about it. It's kind of constant like no mentality. Known is always greater than unknown, like I referenced earlier. You're going to seek that known even if it is a destructive pattern or a destructive rhythm. As long as it's familiar to you, you will have such a risk-averse nature that you will prefer to do that which you know as opposed to doing anything you don't know, even if it's 100% guaranteed to be good. And here's a last little thing that I think is super interesting. When you are in a situation where you're in this chronic state of stress, you are feeling like the pessimistic nature is like deeply enrooted in you. When you start to see changes, particularly in a situation where it's like your child is improving, when you start to see these changes, that in and of itself triggers in you this reluctant, like receding back to what I know mentality, and you will purposely like reframe the situation to make it seem like you're still where you are now. So like, I mean, we've like to the point where it's like doesn't even make logical sense. And again, I don't want to, this is not like a call out or anything, but it's like just understanding the neurology of these parents sometimes is you'll see the child that has gone from nonverbal to speaking, but in their brain, they're like, yeah, but he's not really making coherent sentences. And it's like, or yeah, but he's, I don't really understand. I might understand him, but maybe they don't understand him over there. So it's, he's not going to be able to make it as cool. It's like, so they like reframe the situation as a negative, even when it is a positive. Because obviously that's stressful to them. So that is something we cannot blame the parent for. The call to action here basically is if you are a parent in this situation and you feel like this is speaking to you or you feel like this is about you or you know somebody who's in this situation, what this means is that you got to get out of this primitive neurology and into a state of logical frontal cortex neurology. And the question is, well, what do you do? How do you do with that? Well, brain development, stress, and subluxation are what causes it. Then if you reverse those things, it's what's going to fix it, right? So the first one that we talked about last week is if you get the afferentation right, you get the input right. If you're unsubluxated, your nervous system is able to input the proper nervous system afferentation, whatever, basically the input is going into the brain properly and not distorted, then that is going to be the first linchpin that pushes you into the part of the brain development pattern that will decrease the stress, because stress, first of all, is coming from a subluxated nervous system. So then when the stress comes down, and on top of that, there's other things that you can do to decrease your stress. Obviously, if there's 3 components of stress, and you can look at all 3 of them, physical, chemical, and emotional, and analyze your life and be like, where are these 3 biggest influences of stress in my life? If I can decrease them as much as possible, then my brain development, assuming I'm a child or an adult who has reached this point in brain development naturally, if there's input issues that have been there long enough, some of the brain development inputs, or some of the brain development issues, like primitive reflex retention, oculomotor issues or whatnot, even just vestibular balance things, those will start to fix themselves if you get these other 2 things right. If you need additional help, well, then we might be able to support you in that, and you might be able to find resources for that. But once you get those pieces in line, and you have the proper stimulation, the proper energy, nourishment, the proper oxygen, you're getting enough exercise and whatnot, there's no reason for your nervous system not to return to here. There's no reason for you not to heal. You're designed to heal. So as a call out to situations like this where we see a ton of kids, we want to make sure that the parents know it is absolutely crucial for the parents to also be getting themselves checked, getting their nervous system regulated, doing things at home to help themselves so that they can be the better help for their kid and not actually end up becoming accidentally sometimes a hindrance to the development of the child. So that's my call to action. If you're a parent and you're not underneath care and one of your children is, whether that's with us or any other chiropractor, highly encourage you. Please reach out, get yourself on the schedule, get your nervous system checked out, because it's going to be really, really important, not only for you, but for the actual importance of the healing of your child. And if you want to know what to do about like actually decreasing the 3 stresses, the physical, chemical, and emotional stressors at home, we actually have a program for that, which is school. So we have a school community called Regulated Kids, which basically is the way for you to build a regulated home. We want to make sure that your home is a place that actually provides healing and that you don't only seek out healing in doctor's offices. The 4 walls of a doctor's office are going to be great, whether that's a therapy clinic or whether that's a chiropractic office or whatever it is, pediatrician office. Lord willing, they're doing great work and they're getting healing inside those 4 walls. But what we don't want is when they come home, that the 4 walls of the home become a hindrance. So we want to make sure that they're at home getting healing done by not only just like you being a less stressed out parent running the home, but actually structuring the home to where it actually provides healing for the child. And that goes from like every room of the home. That's kitchen, living room, bedroom, rhythms, bedtime routines, morning time routines. Anything that we can do to help you with that is what is in that school community, Regulated Kids. So if you are not a part of that, so if you're on Instagram and you see us here and you want to know what's in there, there is a link you can join completely free. It's like there's a free trial in there so you can see what's going on inside. And if it interests you, highly encourage you to do that, because these are things that you can do at home, whether you are already doing these things or not. I think it'll be beneficial for you. The reason I built that is because I basically found that as a gap in the issue. I found that the gap in the world. There's a lot of things that are therapies directed at kids. They're all great, but there's not a lot that's actually aimed at the parent to build a home to make that an environment that's super suitable. Cool? All right. Are we